But joining us right now, this is a real treat for us here to talk some National Football League and to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. As Bengals reporter for ESPN, Ben Baby, who joins us here on You Better You Bet. Ben's been covering the Bengals for 7 years. You can check him out on Twitter at Ben_Baby. This is your You Better You Bet debut. Welcome to the show. We appreciate you hanging with us this afternoon. First question. What's going on and what's the latest with Trey Hendrickson, and will there be a resolution at some point between now and training camp?
Yeah, the Bengals said that there's 100 days between now and that season opener. I have a hunch that we're going to be using all of those days to figure out what that's going to look like, because Trey has made it clear, even before his press conference recently, talking to him throughout last year, you could tell this contract was top of mind for him as he went through that season where he had 17 and a half sacks, was a sack leader, first All-Pro, along with Jamar Chase, the Bengals have had in nearly a decade. This is something that's really important to him. He's looking for a long-term deal with a significant amount of guarantees. The Bengals are communicating with him that they want a shorter-term deal. And the market and really the Bengals' whole infrastructure has shifted a ton over these last 12 months. When you look at how some of these other edge rushers have gotten paid, I think the unlikely scenario of T. Higgins getting his deal done, I think that maybe has thrown a wrench into all of this as well. So a lot of moving pieces, and we'll see how much this market continues to shift. We saw the trade, as our Adam Schefter reported today, Bryce Huff looking like a post-June 1 trade to San Francisco. So there's going to be some moving pieces in this trade market. Where does Hendrickson fit in? I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how it unfolds.
It's kind of wild, Ben, because I think going into the draft, like one of the mocks that I actually had more success with was Cincinnati, because I thought, with the Hendrickson uncertainty, they're going to draft an edge rusher. They drafted an edge rusher. And now Shamar Stewart's going through contract issues. So it just seems like every time the Bengals take that step forward to move in a positive direction, they're taking a step backwards as well. Can you update us on the latest with the rookie defensive end who's also going through the Trey Hendrickson debate?
Yeah, as I just said on NFL Live a few minutes ago, I don't know how the Bengals are getting through practices without any edge rushers out there. So, we'll see how this continues to develop. We see Shamar Stewart on the side at practice. He's looking to get some contract language settled. The Bengals, according to his side, they're trying to introduce precedent in there that would affect the guarantee structure, and apparently void that in future years. The Bengals contend that it's more of a standard deal that go to rookies. But there definitely seems to be something to where the Shamar wants to feel comfortable. I know he's talked a lot about getting mental reps, and when I last spoke with him, he told me that he'd like to be on the field, but he wants to mitigate that level of risk that currently sits as that deal is construed. And, it's going to be important for him to get on the field as quickly as possible. I think it's probably in both sides' interest to get this hashed out, because you don't know what you're going to have in that edge rusher room, because not only the Hendrickson situation, but a lot of unproven quantities in a large scale on that side of the ball. Joseph Osai, their leading sack returner, coming back. He's on a 1-year deal. You're not sure what Miles Murphy still is going to bring to the table, their former first-round pick from a couple years ago. And then if this thing really drags into the regular season, you're not really sure what you're getting at edge rusher. So the quicker you can get Shamar Stewart up to speed and really get him acclimated, especially given the questions about him coming out of Texas A&M, can he increase that sack production that just wasn't there during his time in College Station, where I was previously at before I came to Cincinnati. So we'll see how that continues to unfold, but definitely kind of similar to this trade deal. I think it's going to require both sides finding some sort of middle ground that makes everyone feel good. And I think every side is kind of entrenched. So a really fascinating situation to see develop.
This is You Better You Bet family. Bet Jared Smith. We're hanging out with Ben Baby, ESPN's Bengals reporter on Twitter at Ben_Baby. I want to hit on something you just mentioned, though, because you said this Trey Hendrickson thing has the potential to go into the season. Like, at that point, like, is a trade more viable than him finding some sort of extension with this team? And I guess what would it take to trade for him? Like, do you think, is he going to take a first-round pick? But I know he's on the other side of 30, or is it like a day 2 pick? I guess what do you think would be the value for Trey Hendrickson on the open market? Because you look around the NFL, particularly in the NFC, there's some teams that have young quarterbacks that could use some pass rush help and are probably wondering, why isn't our team looking to trade for Trey Hendrickson?
Yeah, I think that compensation component's a really interesting conversation. And when you look at what it's going to take to potentially get him on a roster on a new deal, and what he's looking for, and given that the top of the market's $40 million with Myles Garrett. I've never got the sense Trey really wants to be at the top or reset it. He wants to be in a range that fits closer to where his on-field production has sat over the last few years, which has been among the best in the league. And I think he's got every right to ask for that. And so you got to look at that component, but also, especially when you look at how, we've probably advanced beyond the Jimmy Johnson chart and trying to get a sense of how to analyze trades. I think the Fitzgerald Spielberger model is a really good one. The ESPN's got a great trade evaluator model as well. And when you look at giving up a first-round pick, that's a really expensive proposition, especially when you're not sure how many years a player is going to have. If you give up, 5 years of team control for a player who might be on the field at a peak value of 2 to 3 years, that's a lot of money or a lot of value to be giving up in a trade. So will it be a day 2, potentially a high day 3 pick? As this continues to develop, I think Trey's going to have to figure out, how to best maximize his leverage, which he's done already, and he's been very proactive himself throughout this whole process. We saw Chris Jones miss a couple games a couple years ago, and quickly both sides were able to come to an agreement, and we saw what he's meant to Kansas City. Could we see a similar situation? Or could we see what happened in 2020 where Carlos Dunlap, who was a Bengals, I think the official all-time sack leader since sacks were counted, was very unhappy with his role, basically went on Instagram Live eating potato chips saying, hey, get me out of here. And eventually they did ahead of the trade deadline. That was I remember that whole debacle. So Carlos effectively was able to force his way out. So I think it can go one or two ways if it goes into the regular season.
It's just wild, Ben, because it seems like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I was looking at Mike Clay, your ESPN colleague's projections for the Bengals this year. Hendrickson and Stewart, of the 25 sacks accounted for on the edge rushers, Stewart and Hendrickson are going to count for 18 of them on those projections. Like, Cincinnati cannot afford these two guys not to be playing at peak level. But we see it over and over again with the contract situations that they just have these issues getting these guys happy and in camp. What is it with Cincinnati behind the scenes that make the negotiations so tough?
Yeah, I think that the Bengals have done a good job over the years of really fighting for what they believe in and getting good value. And to their credit, this Hendrickson deal could go down as one of the best free agency deals of all time. You go look at it. He initially signed at 4 years, $60 million, 15 years APY. That has been a bargain for them. When you look at some of the other contracts, Hendrickson has performed way over market, which is why he's tried to get a new deal in recent years. And the Bengals, to their credit, have successfully made sure that he hasn't really been cashing in too fully. They've been able to renegotiate the deal, throw on an extra year, give him a few extra $1 million, but haven't really paid the premium that Hendrickson commands. And when you look at it, they were not willing to give up that extra year of value that they had on Jamar Chase. Wanted to try to maximize T. Higgins' value as much as possible. And then they eventually did pay top of market for Jamar. They pay top of market for T. So I think they have those data points in their favor. The question has always been, once you spend the money on those receivers, do you have the money as well to spend on an edge rusher? And they do. But I think the better question is, do they want to spend on someone like y'all mentioned, who is currently 30, turns 31 this year? We know the production that you get out of edge rushers once they cross that threshold. I think Trey's probably a little bit younger than his on-field, than his age would suggest, given that he didn't get a lot of run early in his time with New Orleans, and he keeps himself in great shape as a guy who's always at the team facility year-round. So I think that's something that works in his favor. But I think all of those components and how the Bengals negotiate go into guys maybe not getting exactly what they want until the Bengals feel it's time for them to go out and set that deal and kind of set that market.
Yeah, Trey Hendrickson starting his career in New Orleans, playing for Dennis Allen. Bears maybe could use an extra pass rusher if they wanted to go ahead and call up the Cincinnati Bengals and bring him to the Windy City. So if the pass rushers are all in flux, I'm assuming at some point they'll get Shamar Stewart signed, or maybe it turns into Joey Bosa missing a couple games, something like that. But he'll be on the field coming up this season. Trey Hendrickson, we still don't know. Sam Hubbard, retired. With the defense is currently constructed, with now Al Golden as the DC, no longer Lou Anarumo, who's in Indianapolis, can the Bengals actually get back to the playoffs? Because it feels like they're just running back what we saw last year. And with as great a season as Burrow and Chase and Higgins had, they still ended up 9-8 on the outside looking in. Can this team actually end the 2-year playoff drought as currently constructed?
Yeah, I think they definitely can. And I think it's going to really, we talk a lot about the receivers. I think it's going to depend on two specific units on the defense. I think it's going to depend on that secondary and that interior defensive line. One key point that Al Golden mentioned is that they've got to earn the right to rush the passer. And I thought that was interesting. And talking to a source this week, we kind of chewed on that a little bit, and it got me thinking in that they may end up using Hendrickson, those edge rushers, a little bit differently. And if you're able to maybe get teams into third and long situations, second and medium situations, not giving up as much on the ground as they did last year, and then have your secondary play better like it did in the back half of last season when they closed the year with 5 straight wins, I think that's a recipe to getting much better defensive play. And you saw how the Bengals attacked this offseason. They went out and they gave B.J. Hill a contract extension. They got him back in the fold. They went out and they got TJ Slayton from the Packers, a very sturdy body in the middle that they can help solidify that run defense. Then they went out and drafted a couple linebackers as well and getting Demetrius Knight, Barrett Carter, and guys to help out Logan Wilson in that middle and inside the building. I know that they're really optimistic about Cam Taylor-Britt playing like he did early in his career. DJ Turner playing well, coming off injury. Lots of optimism about Dax Hill. And if all of those components come together, that can help negate what you maybe aren't going to get out of the edge rusher situation. And you can maybe queue up a few more blitzes, let your guys loose on the edges. If you can be better on first and second down, put them in third and long, and really put that pressure on offenses, I can see a scenario where this defense gets better, but it's going to be up to that secondary. It's going to be up to that interior. And most of all, really up to Al Golden to maximize the pieces that he's been given.
Yeah, that you read my mind. I love that line, earn the right to rush the passer. And Al Golden, I think Notre Dame last year's defense was about as good as it gets, especially with the personnel. They had good personnel, but not at the elite level to make it to the the final championship and actually have a chance competing there against Ohio State. What has that transition like from college to the pros been for Al Golden? Have you noticed any bumps in the road, or is this going to be, hey, they're going to hit the ground running? Obviously, the personnel might be an issue, but the scheme and just the transition, speak to that so far for Coach Golden.
Yeah, I think when you talk to guys in the locker room like we have throughout these offseason workouts and OTA period, everybody has been singing Al's praises. And for some of these guys, it's someone that they know because Golden was here during that Super Bowl run as their linebackers coach. So it's a guy that Logan Wilson knows really well. And when you talk about kind of that schematic flexibility, what he's going to be able to do, get younger guys to be able to play faster, get them up to speed a little bit quicker. I think those are all things that they're banking on. Specifically when you talk about that back end, being able to maybe keep things simplified more so than they were under Lou Anarumo, I think it's going to be huge. We saw whenever Lou did simplify things at the back end of last season, that secondary really responded. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest what ifs, as if that had happened earlier in the year, would the Bengals have been able to make the playoffs and really made some noise because that offense was playing, really potent. Burrow playing at a much higher level than he had when they went to the playoffs in 21 or 22. So I think when you talk to guys in the building, they seem really high on Golden and they feel confident that he's going to get them in good positions and really pick that defense up. And it's going to be a lot riding on his shoulders because, he doesn't have the same expensive pieces that Anarumo had early in his tenure. He's got a lot of young players that they're going to have to work around with these receivers and quarterback on these big contracts.
But Ben, before we let you go, I got to ask you something here real quick, and it has nothing to do with the Cincinnati Bengals, nothing to do with football. It's about your name. Because like my name, Femi Abebefe, a pretty unique name. It's a Nigerian name. So I'm always curious when I come across people with unique names. I see you on SportsCenter. You're crushing it. You're out there at Cincinnati, like at training camp reports, OTA reports, absolutely crushing it. Like, what is the origin behind Baby as the last name? Because I'm just curious. It's just genuinely curious about I was like, hey, Ben Baby, that's a cool name. Like he's killing it on SportsCenter. What's the origin? We got about 45 seconds.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. I actually didn't know this until I started my first job at the Denton Record Chronicle covering high school sports. A blogger based in Australia reached out to me and was doing blog about names. And so I had to go ask about it. And it's a very prominent South Indian name. There's a lot of babies in South India, in the state of Kerala, where my parents are from. So that's where it's at. They're very common. I have yet to meet one in person. I will be very excited when I do. Everyone asks me, is that your real name? I said, I promise you, it looks and sounds exactly how you see it on paper.
I don't have
Absolutely
that problem
love
with
it.
my last name. With Smith is my last name. I don't have that
Jared
problem
Smith.
at all.
Nobody's asking about the origin of Jared Smith, but we are
No.
with our guy, Ben Baby, absolutely crushing it, has been doing so for 7 years as the ESPN Bengals reporter. Hey, buddy, like, we know training camp is around the corner. I know this Trey Hendrickson thing is going to be something that you're following closely. We wish you all the best of luck. I'm sure you'll knock out the coverage, and I hope to talk soon down the line, man. Be well.
Sounds good. Thank you all.